right. Hi.
Hello.
It's good
Hello,
to see you all.
Cassie.
It's very nice to see you. So, Carolyn, I want to start with you. How has being a woman in leadership influenced your views on diversity and inclusion in the workplace?
So, when you look around in different organizations, M3, other companies out there, you really start to notice there's not a lot of diversity when you get into certain levels. And so I think it's good for us as leaders to recognize that and to make sure that we're seeking out those people that have that potential to be leaders.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Sujata, do you have anything to add to that?
I agree. I
Yeah.
think if there are not too many people, sometimes I look around that look like me, for instance, and I think we could all do with more diversity for sure. So you have more viewpoints for doing anything. So, yep, I agree.
Yeah.
Second everything she said.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we have our partners meeting coming up in June, and our keynote speaker is Dr. Mary Key. And so we're very excited to have her and have more diversity at our meeting, and she'll bring a lot to the table. So I'm looking forward to that discussion with her too. Okay, so McKinsey and Company released a report for 2021, and they did some research on the number of women in different leadership roles. So of all VPs, the SVP role only had 30% represented as women. When you get into the C-suite, only 24% were represented by women. So, Sujata, what do you think is contributing to these stats? Why aren't we at 50%, for example?
I think there's a lot of perceptions and misperceptions about women in leadership or their capability to be leaders, and I think that factors into why there's a higher bar for women to reach that C-suite. And if that happens, then there are fewer peers that help the next set of people reach that level also. So I think it just seems to be a chain of things. Um, we definitely need more people there and make it and get rid of all these perceptions or in somehow get people to get over it, if
Right.
you will.
Okay. And what about you, Carolyn? What do you think is keeping us from getting to the 50% mark?
There's obviously lots of different reasons, probably, as Sujata mentioned a couple. I also think sometimes as women are getting further into their career, potentially that they're having children as well. So sometimes you see them exiting, you know, ugh, the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that has to do with they want to be stay-at-home moms, and that's great and that works for them. Some of it is the pay, with the time they factor in,
Right.
paying for daycare or childcare and what they're getting paid because they haven't made it to certain levels. It doesn't financially make sense for them. So, some of that I think is definitely exiting the workforce.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree.
I
So
agree.
then what motivated you to stay through those challenges and be a leader?
I think I've always felt if I had ideas and I want to see it, done, and if it's, I figured that I somehow had to be in the process to be in a position
Right.
to make those decisions that will
Right.
make those things happen, and especially and essentially if you don't have a structure that supports your ideas and decisions and so on, you have to take on those roles to make things happen.
Right.
So that kind of push propels you to go take those roles, I think.
Right. So putting yourself in a position of
Putting in
influence.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
To make it happen, if you will.
Okay.
And also be kind of a role model for all the people that follow you and whom you can influence and sort of help, raise the game for everyone. If
You're
you
very
will.
good at that too.
So
By the way.
thank you,
are.
appreciate
You're
it.
very good at that. And what about you, Carolyn? What made you kind of stick with it and stay long enough to be in position of leadership?
From a young age, I've always enjoyed the inner workings of how business works.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as you start working, you realize the way to influence that is to be successful and work your way up and really be able to influence business decisions. So that's always been interesting to me and, a goal of mine as I've, gone through my career.
Right. Well, that's fantastic, and you do a great job at it too. So,
Thank you.
yeah, so that's great. So we all know that there's power structures within organizations, right? And I'm just curious what you've learned in your career, over the years. How do you handle those power structures from early on in your career to how you do that now? What has changed? We'll start with you, Sujata.
I think early on, you have to learn to, if any kind of rejection you face, you just have to think of it as a learning experience so that it takes you to the next level. Otherwise, it should not let it stop you move forward, essentially, and just keep moving. And then later on, when you acquire those, leadership roles, then you have to learn how to balance, a lot of things, your relationships, your priorities, your time, all
Right.
of that, so that you can keep doing what you're doing. So it's a different structure. It's different when you're starting out versus when later in life, later positions, but you still, both has its challenges.
Do you find that you have to work just as hard today as you did early on?
In some ways, yes. Not completely, but yes, there are some things because you have to address different challenges.
Okay.
So, as I said, it's more of balancing, learning how to balance things,
Right.
which is and also strangely, we still have perceptions and things you have to keep
Right.
every day trying to address. So, yes.
Right. And what about you, Carolyn?
I think when you're first starting your career out, and maybe a lot of people do this, or maybe it's mostly women, but you tend to be a little quieter and not speak up as much. As you get further in your career, you get more comfortable too. You do realize I have ideas, I need to speak up and say
Right.
them, obviously at the appropriate times. But I think that's one of the biggest things you learn when you're first starting out your career, when to speak up and when to voice those opinions.
Right. Right. Yeah, I have found that authority isn't always granted. Sometimes you just have to take it.
Take-
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Very good answers. Okay. Okay, and kind of just thinking back along that topic, I mean, we've all had challenges, growing our career and evolving and learning, but is there anything that stands out as the most significant challenge you've had to overcome being a woman in the workplace?
I think oftentimes just being able to speak up loud enough, especially if you're in a room full of people that are talking, and you have to overcome that. Because I don't think as women we do a lot of talking over people. So that was one thing I had to learn, and I still struggle with sometimes. The other thing is what you said about it doesn't get granted to you, you have to take it.
Right.
And so you have to learn how to be assertive, where it's warranted. And that's also something, it's a learned skill. It's not something that comes naturally to women, I think.
Right. But don't rock
So-
the boat too much.
Right.
Yeah.
But be assertive, not
Right.
aggressive.
Right,
Assertive is
right,
what
right,
I was
right.
talking about.
Right.
Right.
And Carolyn, anything stand out as the biggest challenge?
I think for me, being a mother, having kids, and convincing people that you can be a mother and you can have a job and you can do both and you can do both well. I think there's a lot of pressure put on young moms or any moms these days to, you should stay home with your children. No, well, how are you going to provide for your children if you don't go to work? There's such a tug on that, and there's so many people that have their opinions of what you should do.
Right.
So I think, figuring out what is best for you either way,
Right.
and then knowing that you can do both jobs. You
Right.
can do it all.
Right.
So I think that I always figured I would work and have kids, but you just never know until you do it,
Right.
and
What-
how you're going to do those jobs. So I think that was interesting to kind of go through that phase of life.
Right, and what works for you doesn't necessarily work for the next person,
Right.
and so on and so forth. Yeah, absolutely.
Essentially, don't let anyone define you. You define you.
Right.
Right. I like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I love the question. Do you not miss your daughter while you're at work? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I do. I miss her. I miss her all the time. But I miss her when she's at school too, and
Right.
maybe I'm not at work. But yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we all know women are amazing, right? And bring a lot to the table. So, Carolyn, what do you think are the key benefits of having more women leaders in an organization?
I think any diversity in an organization is good. You know, you get different perspectives, you have different backgrounds that you're pulling from, different ideas and thought processes. So, you know, bringing more women in, you know, brings a different thought process and perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You know, women tend to want to mentor more, want to help, you know, men and women as well, but they
Right.
have that need to mentor and help other people. So I think that brings, you know, a different, you know, diversity into the workplace, and you know, helps everyone, helps the business
Right.
grow.
Right. Yeah, agreed. What about you,
Yeah,
Sujata?
I think you need balance with most decisions, right? And then you need different perspectives,
Mhm.
and also women generally are consensus builders, right? They've done a lot of studies that say their style of leadership is they try to build consensus towards decisions and so on. So you need that also
I agree.
during decision making. So I think overall, diversity is a good thing to have more views on anything. So yeah, I completely agree. Everything she said,
Right.
that's true.
Yeah, I agree as well.
Mm.
So, Sujata, as you think about your day to day or even how we collaborate at M3, how can we be better allies to other women in the workplace?
I think in general, more communication amongst us and also amongst all the women, and especially people that are not heard as much or who are kind of timid about taking some steps.
Right.
Just reaching out, um, kind of network, socialize, and also kind of highlight things that other women have done. You know, a shout out is great.
Mhm.
Especially if you hear it from your own peers, and just that, and also just by being who you are, also it's inspiring to other people in the
Right.
organization, right? So
Right.
that also helps. So I think I would say just that.
Okay.
Mhm.
So, Carolyn, if someone came up to you today and said, I really think I'm gonna give it up, and it's not for me. It's not working. What would you say to encourage them?
I mean, I would ask them why they think that, what led them to that decision, and listen to them. I think that's the first thing. People want to be heard and
Right.
want you to understand where they're coming from. And then hopefully take from some of my experiences and say, you know, I understand you're feeling this way. This is a time I had to go through this. But I think the biggest thing is really just listening to them and why they feel that way. And if there's anything in there that I can help them with and overcome,
Right.
I would do that.
Right. Yep. That's awesome. Okay, so as we think about how we want to become more diverse and inclusive, what can we do to be more mindful of who is and isn't at the table? How do we teach others to do that as well? Do you want to go, Sujata?
I think at any given minute, any moment, you should be always mindful for sure, and look to see, especially if you look around a room and you notice someone not saying something, or
Mhm.
just call them out or call them
Right.
into the conversation, not call them out, but call them into the conversation, or just highlight something they did, or something. Just be inclusive in settings like that, and do you find moments and opportunities as you go along to
Right.
include more people in the conversation, or just plain listen when they start speaking? And if they say something, just say, "Hey, that's great. Did everyone hear that?
Right.
That's excellent," or something.
Right.
Just give them some encouragement to keep going, and also yourself,
Right.
so you speak up as well.
So, Carolyn, how do we, I guess, participate in the process of understanding who's not at the table? So Sujata mentioned, okay, if they're at the table, we can bring them along, but what if they're
Yeah.
not even there? Then what do we do?
I think as leaders, it's important for us to go seek out those that have that potential.
Correct.
Get to know them, talk to them, share stories, share the way we got there,
Mhm.
how it is to be a woman in the workplace, and then again, like I said, listen to them and what their successes are and what their struggles are, and see if we can pinpoint something that we can help get them there.
Okay.
It's like sharing stories helps, I think,
Absolutely.
almost always
Mhm.
helps. Saying, oh yeah, I went through that too, and here's what I did, or, you know, something like that.
Right.
Right.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you both for sharing your thoughts with us today. I mean, we know that it's important now more than ever to empower women in leadership and to encourage that growth in their careers. We also know the best companies do that, like M3.
Right.
So I appreciate you being here with me today. I always enjoy spending as much time as possible with you two. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Cassie.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of In 3 Minutes. Cassie, Carolyn, and Sujata all had some great advice for women and how they can promote themselves while adding much needed value to the workplace. They also highlighted some numerical figures that prove there is still work to be done throughout the U.S. workplace. The representation of women is in fact improving, and it's our job to keep that trend going. If you liked this episode, don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, hoteliers.